Most of you know that I have been doing my work where we have a company that teaches technical combat casualty care for the US government. We teach to a lot of foreign governments as well, but it has everything to do with battlefield medicine. And I really love the work, but I feel now that after having been out of teaching remote viewing for a good almost 10, 12 years now, I feel like it's time for me to get back to it again. I have this urge to get back and teach. I have this urge to get back and lecture. I just want to get back and start doing it again. So I've been talking with Rebecca Nielsen out in Vancouver and a team of remote viewers that have been with us. I've been with them now for, golly, better part of 2 decades. And we've been to Peru and a bunch of other places together. And Becky with David Hughes teaching just put on a fabulous class, coordinated remote viewing class back there. And there's going to be another one of those classes. And Becky make sure that Jay knows that. And we'll post that here during this talk. So we've also got a class that we're going to be doing in Toronto, but there's a class, a coordinated remote viewing class going to be in Vancouver as well with Becky's group that I will participate in. David Hughes will teach it again, but I'll be there as a primary lecturer and talking about the physics of the metaphysics and doing all those kinds of things while Dave spends a great deal of time teaching structure and that stuff, which is the difficult part of doing the teaching of remote viewing. And I'm just really grateful to have anybody that will teach, that understands structure like I've taught it and will continue to teach it in that fashion. And then it allows me to do the fun stuff, which is to talk about the physics of the metaphysics and tell stories and do those things that helps you embrace this thing called coordinated remote viewing, extended remote viewing, embracing your shadow, and all the other things that we do with this fabulous tool that we've been exercising for 20 years now. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm really excited to do it again in Vancouver and really excited to do it in Toronto. But that's where I've been. I just got to a place where I felt like it was important for me to stop teaching remote viewing when I did. The war was ramping up. There was this call to get back into that again. I promised Patty that I would not go to the shooting side of it again, that I would try to find some other way where I could serve and not have to put on a uniform and be a soldier. And so I just happened to saddle up with some former Rangers that I had served with, and some SEALs and other folks. And we started doing, as I said, teaching tactical combat casualty care. So instead of being a shooter, I actually got to go do my second greatest love, which was working in the field of medicine. And I was able to take my training skills and bring those into that environment and put all the stuff that I had mastered as a trainer in the Ranger Regiment, and also that I had mastered just in teaching remote viewing. And I was able to go back now and farm that mechanism, using all those tools that I had mastered, which was teaching people how to pull the performance curve and the retention curve together as quickly as you can after the incident, the inciting incident. And that is what defines mastery of any particular thing that you might be learning. So just as we applied that to coordinated remote viewing and extended remote viewing and others, we were applying it now to teaching medicine. So when we first took over that piece of medicine, I can still remember that we had medics that were tactical medics, that we were out on training sites and they were running down to a casualty in the environment that we were teaching it. And they were running down in their scrubs with wearing Crocs and, carrying a little plastic tub with all of their instruments and stuff like that in it. And it was like, no, you can't, we cannot teach combat medicine using that technique. We have to teach combat medicine by framing it in the environment of combat so that it has all the smoke and flame and the intensity, because we know that when we increase the severity and the intensity of the learning environment, that's how we learn faster. That's how we are able to pull that retention and performance curve together really quick. Anyway, that's a whole theory of just education that we were applying there, and that's what I've been doing. But now it looks like the time has come to step back into the teaching of remote viewing. Why? I think we are squarely at this juncture in the fourth turning of this human paradigm shift. We are in the fourth turning, the destructive phase of this human evolution. And those of you that were with me back when we were teaching this as an aspect of how we can use remote viewing to increase this collective consciousness by perfecting self to a whole nother level, a whole nother degree, that through this exploration and the application of remote viewing, that we were able to in some way cause a shift, this paradigm shift in this phase of human evolution, this fourth turning, which is the destructive phase, so that we can move more quickly into the rebuilding phase. And I firmly believe, I know that through the mastery of self and through the mastery of the practice of self with others, that we have an ability to apply these tools to do just fantastic, amazing things when you know and stop believing that this is an ability that you might be able to master. When you start knowing that it is an ability that is there for you to simply take, for you to simply embrace and to use and to do something amazing with your life as a result of it. Could you do it without remote viewing? Yeah, possibly. Yeah, sure you can. Would remote viewing enhance that, escalate it? Yeah, all of the above. And I'm sure that some of the questions that some of you will ask today or tonight will go along those lines. We had an enormous amount of questions. I was really excited about this when Jay showed me this long list, page after page of questions that people had sent in. It was amazing. So thank you for your eagerness, for your curiosity, and your desire to just hear what I might have to say about anything, let alone remote viewing. So with that, that kind of catches you up with what I've been doing for the last 15 years, why I shifted out of coordinate remote viewing or teaching remote viewing, and why I've got an interest now of coming back into it again. So any direct questions that anyone has right now before we just kind of get into the list, anything?
We can go into the email questions and then take a look at anything that comes up in the interface here with the chat.
Sure.
The first one, this is actually a question that was left over from the last call you did and didn't get to answer it. So we promised it'd be the first one for this call. And it comes from Anastasia and would like to know if you're familiar with reverse speech technology. And if yes, how would you advise to employ it best?
Reverse teach?
Reverse speech.
Reverse speech. Not familiar.
Okay.
Sorry, I am not. No.
All right. Jump to.
And maybe send something in to talk a little bit about it. Maybe I can expound on it, but just for face value, no, I've not heard of it.
All right. Jump on to the next one here. And it comes from Trace, and they're wondering if you did any other audiobooks, if you ever recorded any audiobooks other than your own.
Yeah, I wish. No, there is, and I'm assuming you're asking about Psychic Warrior.
No, they actually heard another audiobook and thought that it sounded like you, and they're wondering if you endorsed the book.
No, I have not done any other audiobooks. We are right now in the process of writing. I'm writing 3 books. The book that I'm trying to pour as much of time as I can right now is something that will be a surprise to folks. I was many of you know that I was an Army Ranger company commander, and that I commanded a company for a long time, and I really loved it. And I was asked by a number of Ranger officers to actually write the biography for General Kenneth C. Lohr. And General Lohr was the man that was given the General Creighton W. Abrams Charter to reform 1st Ranger Battalion. This was in 1974. And he was given that mission by General Creighton Abrams to actually take and reform a Ranger Battalion. And the charter had very specifics about what he was supposed to do and why he was supposed to reform it, how he was going to reform it, the standards that had to be upheld. And it really crafted the outline for how U.S. Army Rangers today function and operate, and how they are, how they're put together. Their TO&E is slightly different than other light infantry organizations. They are a special operations infantry organization and support that role. But he was the guy that got together, was picked by the Army to to build the 1st Ranger Battalion again. And the first time it had been done since the Korean War. First time there were actually Rangers since the Korean War. Yeah, there were Rangers in Vietnam War, but they were not, they weren't a Ranger Battalion. They were independent long-range patrol companies called LRP companies, and they operated as Rangers, but they were separate patrol groups, in some cases just companies that were out there, not an entire battalion. The battalion, 686 some odd men, where a company is roughly 200 some odd men. And nobody's ever told this guy's story. So I really felt it a privilege and an honor to be able to do it. And then I got sick. And some of you know, I got really sick. I had an autoimmune deficiency that just really kicked my butt for like the last 2 years. And I've been plagued with infections, and it's been really difficult to stay ahead of all of that. But thank God managed to do that. And I'm, back whole and healthy. And so I started his book and did all the interviews and things 2 years ago, but now I have the opportunity to get back and get started on it again. And I'm really eager to get it done, get it off my plate to honor him and accomplish this work before he passes on, or before I get sick, if I get sick again. So that's just one of the big things. And then the other thing that I'm doing is I'm working on a book of fiction. And the book of fiction that I'm working on, I'll let you all in on the secret, is that I'm going to write this thing, and I'm going to put in this thing as much truth as I can really put into it. But I'm going to label it as fiction. And I'm going to do that because if I were to label it as nonfiction, there'd probably be people try to stop me from publishing it. So I'm going to call it fiction. And then you guys are smart enough that you'll figure out what is and what isn't, in the reading of it. But I'm really eager to do that again. And then I'm going to write another book of nonfiction, which is to talk about, we need to write a book on extended remote viewing. We need to write a book that's going to not only talk about ERV, but talk about applications of coordinate remote viewing and extended remote viewing in our individual lives. Because every time there's a lecture that I do, the question invariably comes up, or questions of how do I use this to decide what's next for me in my life? How do I use this to decide what I'm going to do in my career? How do I do this? How do I do that with it? And there's all these questions centering on, what are the practical applications of remote viewing in your life? And we'll talk about that tonight a little bit, because I know I saw the list, there are a number of questions like that. And hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those things for you. Often the answers that I will give you might be even more confusing than were I not to say anything at all. But it is such a unique thing to decide exactly how remote viewing is going to be utilized by each individual in the manipulation of their choices in life. Now, I can tell you what I think, what I do, what I apply, what I practice, and you can try to understand that and embrace it in that way. If it doesn't answer your questions completely, then ask it again, and I'll try to come at it from a different angle. That's the great thing with this, is that every answer goes to just another angle and another level, another layer that we talk about and that we explore. And there just simply is no black and white. Turn to page 7, and there's the answer for you on this. How you're going to apply remote viewing in your life is unique to each one of us. Each one of us. And what is real or what is applicable today may not be applicable next week or a year from now. It all depends on what you're trying to do with it. And there are so many different variables that come into play with it that there's just never a simple answer for it. I mean, had a really good friend, Shannon, that wrote a question talking about career and said, well, you know, a couple of friends that we got together and we were asking what's next for career and how are we going to use remote viewing and coming about that determination. The answer is it's so difficult to answer that for you. It's because what's driving you? I mean, in order for you to determine what you're going to do or how you're going to use remote viewing is you have to ask yourself, what's your passion? Is money your motivator? Is love, passion, relationship your motivator? Is it job security the motivator, or is it job satisfaction your motivator? All of these things, you have to go through this process of mind mapping all of the potentials and possibilities and start to whittle things down, decide, you know, are you motivated by pain, as many people are? In other words, for me, I often explore the idea based on what I don't want to have to do or what I don't want to have to get myself involved in, where other people address the question by what it is that motivates them to do something, not what motivates them not to do something. Do you see? It's so difficult just to give you a cut and dry black and white answer, but you need to start somewhere. So you start by mind mapping. If it's a career question, then you have to start mind mapping and go through this process of deciding what it is that's actually motivating you and driving you. What path are you going to walk on? Is it going to be, you know, money? And if it's money, then objectify what the money is. Is the money going to be $2.5 million, or is the money going to be $250,000 a year? You know, what is it that you want to make? And is your requirement realistic or unrealistic? I'm going to tell you, if you're going to be mind mapping this and putting it down, nothing is unrealistic. If you really want to throw that down there and then start working towards it, then put it down there. If you're motivated by if what really excites you is the idea that you might make $2.5 million a year, then put it down there, because I'm here to tell you, you can make it. It can be there for you. But are you willing to do all of the things that are required to get you to that particular place? That's the other part of the mind mapping that you have to put down. So where does remote viewing come into that? Well, remote viewing becomes the tool that you use to start generating thought, that you use to start generating these ideas. Now, are you going to sit down and use a coordinate remote viewing process to start doing that? Probably not. I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't. Coordinate remote viewing, we have to remember, is why do we learn coordinate remote viewing in the first place? Well, we teach coordinate remote viewing because what we're trying to get you to do is to go past this point of believing that there is something beyond the physical. Believing is easy. Everyone believes something, right? What we want you to do is know that there is something beyond the physical. And coordinate remote viewing, because it is this deliberate protocol that we follow that generates data, that generates information about a target distant in space-time, that what that allows you to do is to go from belief, like I believe it's possible, to I know it's possible. How do I know it? Because I was engaged in a process where I individually and collectively, the people in the class, or the people in the group that were working this with me, that we individually and collectively came to an irrefutable, undeniable evidence that there was something beyond the physical. We saw, we smelled, we tasted, we felt the texture. We saw the dimension of it. We sketched it. We captured it. We heard the sounds. We tasted the taste, depending upon what your particular modality of perception is, right? Whatever it happens to be, whether your strength of modality comes forward and you're able to produce all of this data because of your strengths, or whether you take those strengths and then shove them to the side and take things that might be a weakness for you and now work to develop those in the process of remote viewing, through coordinate remote viewing, to make them a strength in a modality for you, a modality of perception. So where you used to be only auditory and you wanted to be visual, now you're working to be visual. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot of this stuff at you, and I know for some of you that are new to this, it's probably too much to hear in a very short period of time. That's what the classes are for. That's what the lectures are for in the classes. You'll do that and you'll get this. It'll come to you. There is no one on this planet who cannot learn to do this. No one. You can decide for yourself that you're not going to learn it. You can decide for yourself that it's not for you, that you're incapable of it, and it will be so. I mean, you can make that. You can cut yourself, you know, that out of that particular bolt of cloth, or you can decide that it's there for you. You can listen to me and believe me that if somebody like me can learn to do this, then any of you can learn to do this. And once you learn to do it, and it's a tool, and you learn how to refine and perfect and get stronger here, cut this part away, focus less on that, more on this, back and forth, you begin to just get to this place gradually, then more quickly and quicker, to the point where you now are able to take from the darkness of your mind all of this flow of information about something distant in space-time. And you just stand there and start to get to the place where it's no longer coincidence for you. This is not something, it just happens, and it's not a trick. It's not a parlor trick. It's not some magic show from a magician, you know. It's there. It's really there. It was proven in a bed of science by laser physicists at Stanford Research Institute in Palo Alto, California in the 70s. Proven. You cannot deny it. You can say, oh, hogwash, you know, but it wasn't everything that they said it was, but in fact, it was. And skeptics can all sit back and chirp all that they want to chirp about, you know, how it wasn't proven, and it wasn't this, and it wasn't that, and there are failures in it, and it wasn't all that accurate, and this wasn't. Bull. It was. Ask Russell Targ, Harold Putoff. Ask the other laser physicists that were part of the group with them that did all of the testing and the evaluation, the blind, the double blind, the triple blind studies that were there. Oh yeah, the skeptics are all going to be there still chirping about what it was or what it wasn't, and based on their perceptions. But that's a piece of science and a piece of historical science that cannot be denied. And it's part of our history. It's part of our history as individuals. It's part of our history of our government and the science that our government was involved in the intelligence community. And it is part of why we are all now able to step forward and embrace this and learn how to do this. So that answer of, again, to circle back, of how do I use remote viewing to figure out what's next for me in my life, I hope what I'm starting to give you is the idea that it is a long, involved, drawn out process that you must go through. Remote viewing is the tool that you can use for it. It's not the only tool, but it is a tool, and it is a very powerful tool. And you will start to figure out where you can rely more heavily on it and less so over here, and back and forth. And you will start to put the pieces of the puzzle together for what's next in your life using remote viewing. I hope that answers at least some of the questions that show up every time. And every time I feel like I'm giving you the same answer, but people tell me it's often a different answer to the same question. So
That's great.
what's next?
So you didn't record the audiobook?
No.
Okay. This is a question that comes up quite a bit, and it's always difficult. It's someone who's asking you about finding a missing child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially the question is, are you able to help?
Yeah, sure, people can help to do that. But here is the answer to the question that I have to always give that people often don't think about. First of all, it's like, who's asking? I mean, I have people that know me, that have an email address, that a couple times a year will say, you know, look, so-and-so ended up missing and all of us got together and we think that this guy killed his girlfriend and we want to know if you can help us figure out if he did it. And if he did, you know, where did he put the body? Okay. The answer is, could a team of remote viewers get together and work that particular problem? Yeah. But who's asking? A bunch of beer buddies that are, you know, that are asking the question. And I apologize. I'm not saying that the person asking this question comes from that ilk. I'm just saying to you that the question I ask is, who's asking? Are you going to go up and say and drop this announcement, this pronouncement into the lap of parents looking for a child? You're going to say, well, I got some remote viewers to look at this and, hey, they say your child's dead. Or what are you going to do with this piece of information? So did parents approach you and ask you to look it up or to find it and use some tool that they are okay and comfortable with, or maybe they're not? So all of that groundwork has to be laid first before somebody could ever pull together a group of remote viewers and then work this problem. So let's say that, that the parents of the missing child are approached by someone and that person says, look, you know, we have these people that have this, are trained in this ability. It was used as an intelligence collection tool for decades within the US military, pardon me, within the US government, intelligence services. And we're wondering if you would want to see what they might produce. And then you have to be willing to honor the answer you're giving. Those people may turn around and go, absolutely not. Don't you dare do that. And we don't want to hear we don't want to hear you come back to us with anything. Or let's say that they do say, yes, please do that. Get those people together. Okay, now the next question becomes, somebody's going to end up having to talk to those parents and letting them know what they're really asking for. And being certain that those parents are comfortable with the answer that they might get, that they really understand that the answer might not be what they're looking for. It could be something really horrible. It also might be something that's only partial, a partial answer, not a complete and total answer. But let's say we get past all of those hurdles and challenges, and now you get together and you pull together a team of remote viewers. And this team of remote viewers are going to have to be a group of people that can work front-loaded. Some of them may not be able to work front-loaded, which means that their analytical overlay or their imagination runs away with them if you give them any kind of front-loading information. So whoever is going to be the program manager of this has got to be very careful in selecting this team. They have to know this team of remote viewers. They have to know that this guy cannot be front-loaded, because if you front-loaded him with any kind of information about this target, he's going to take that front load and his imagination is at the speed of thought going to start generating a story around it. And it's not going to be good target data. It's going to be analytical overlay. So let's say that the team is selected where the program manager that's pulling this team together has a team of viewers that he knows these people have their analytical overlay, their imagination in check, and that they are good in taking front-loaded target data and still producing good streams of raw data. And he needs to know that he has people that have strength and modality of being visual viewers. People are able to capture textural and dimensional data, visual pieces, panoramic, interiors, exteriors, whatever the case may be. And he has other elements that are able to pull together the emotional aspects. They're good emotional, aesthetic modality viewers, and they start to pull in a piece of the puzzle. And so now this person sends them out to look at targeting data. They come back with targeting data. The summaries are analyzed. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to shape. This person starts to put things together. This fits with this and this fits with that, generates 3 more questions, sends them back again to look at those. And all of the pieces of the puzzle, just as they were in the intelligence community, are analyzed, processed, put together, some of it thrown out, others of it reformulates more questions. And so you go down the road, piecing this together, session after session after session, recognizing that you never trust the results of one remote viewer operating independently of other remote viewers. All of us are always better than one of us, right? Always. That's rule number 1. So then you just keep pushing through this and recognizing that remote viewing is not 100% accurate. On its best day, it's not 100% accurate. There are still going to be pieces of information that are missing, depending on who's working the target, the day that they're working it, et cetera, the environment in which they're working it, good flow of data, bad flow of data. It might be really horrible today, really good tomorrow. Again, it's not something that somebody does really quickly in one shot in the dark and comes up with an answer and thumps it into the lap of parents that are looking for a missing child. It is a process. The best times that it's ever worked have been where I have worked with as part of a team, and we have worked with law enforcement. And here's the next thing that I want to throw to you as an audience, is that the last time one of these particular targets were worked, we worked with the Baltimore County Police Department. Lynn Buchanan worked with me on this particular target. We worked with a police lieutenant. We worked a cold case. There were a number of us working the case. Cameras were recording us doing it. We produced a great deal of data. The police department was floored by what they were shown in terms of new data or data that confirmed or validated data that they already had. So now they're seeing what viewers are producing. So they're going, oh my God, you know, this validates for us that these people are actually on target and pulling this stuff together. But then after a week of working all of this, we now come back in, give the full briefing to the police department. And then what happens is we say, you know, they did actually terrain mapping where they were matching the visual data that was developed by the viewers, was thrown into a computer that was matching that with known map terrain. And it was pulling up certain areas within the Baltimore County area and outside of it. And they were coming up with locations. And then the police department was going, okay, where? Well, here, around this lake in this particular area. Where around the lake? Well, around the lake. You know, there's a hand sticking out. There's a watch on the hand. You know, it's near this pier. It's, you know, it's here in this particular area. But where? But here in this area. Why don't you go out there and look? And the police department says, we don't have the budget for that. What do you mean, go out and look? Go out and look. No, we can't do that. If you can't tell us exactly where to go look, We cannot go out there and drain this lake and drag the lake, or drain the lake and look for remains in the mud of the lake. We cannot go around and walk the entire perimeter of this lake using cadaver dogs and other things. You know, to all of us, we are asking the question, well, why can't you do that? I mean, why? And for them, it was budget, dollars. We don't have the money to send, 50 law enforcement officers out there to walk a perimeter of a lake that's 10 miles around. And if the fact that you've narrowed it down from, all of Baltimore County to this lake near this pier, and that there's a hand hanging out of the mud somewhere with a watch on it, female hand. That's all wonderful, and it's interesting, and it's all really good for us, but it doesn't help us. We don't have the money to follow up on it. So there again becomes the next piece of the equation. So that's why when somebody asks a question like that, I want to make sure you understand all the variables that come into play, all the dead ends that you can run into, what you can produce and what you must be willing to accept you might be faced with. People who don't want the information, people who cannot afford to take what you give them and run it to ground and run it to fruition. All of these things are part of the answer to, can remote viewers find a missing child? The short answer is yes. The true answer is all of the things that I just shared with you. Okay? We did another one in New Jersey. It was again on a television show. Used police officers from New Jersey, Carteret, New Jersey, and these police officers were trained to do the remote viewing, and the police officers produced the data that was then run to ground by the police department. And it cost all this inter-service cooperation of coastal police, marine boats, and all of this other stuff. And it ran it all the way down to, they found a car, they found a body precisely in the water where the current would have taken it. And all of that was on television, and it was all proven with police officers. It was there that we were able to do that. But there again, it becomes a thing of, so the police department in Carteret, New Jersey, under that particular police chief, Nagy, bought into it and believed it and used all of the inter-service, inter-agency cooperation vehicle that they had to go and run this to ground and prove that it worked and it was of use to them. But does that mean that the police department next door is going to do it? Does that mean that the New York City Police Department is going to buy into it? You see, so it's been proven again and again and again and again that it is there, that it works, that it's real. Yes, we can do it. But where does it go from there? Okay.
That's great. The next question we have is from Boris, and this is another one that we get frequently. They feel that they're being impacted by negative energies or negative entities, and want to know how one can defend themselves or protect themselves from that.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world where people have the ability, particularly now with the internet and social media and all the other stuff that's out there, that you're under a constant potential bombardment by people that can slowly scrape your skin off, trying to do things that they think will be emotionally, intellectually damaging to you. They can, rape you on social media, destroy your reputation, make any kind of an allegation that's out there. They don't have to substantiate it. They can just throw it out there. There are other people that are now trying to make a living by showing that, you know, by allegedly going out there and trying to turn the tables on these other people. So it goes back and forth. There's now more than ever the potential for people to influence you directly, deliberately, negatively. Yes, it's there. How do you fend against that? Well, in terms of the social media piece of that, stay off of the social media. You know, don't put yourself out there and don't engage in all of that, because if you do, you're more than likely going to find yourself, you know, bogged down in some marsh of negativity that will be very difficult to extricate yourself from. I just don't participate. Don't play in that sandbox. Now, are people able to remotely influence you in a negative way? Yes. Is that as powerful as what they're able to do in what they're doing on social media? No, it's not. And to what degree do they have an ability to affect you in a negative way? As much of a degree as you allow them to affect you. I mean, that's the truth. As much as you allow them to influence you and to affect you negatively, it's all up to you. You are the individual that is in charge of you in the moment. Nobody else can influence you in a negative way unless you allow them to do that. Somebody cannot stand outside of you and pour hate into you and you be affected by it unless you allow yourself to be affected by it. Now, how do you stop being affected by it? You make the decision that it's not going to affect you. It's that simple. You don't let it happen. You are in charge of you. You are in charge of the moment. And we talk all about this in the class. In the class, because we talk about Drax delta function, we talk about the moment. I define it for you mathematically. I show you how it works, how it functions. I show you how to be in charge of the moment. And once you embrace that notion that you are in charge of the moment and nobody else, you are in charge of the moment for you. Nobody else can influence that unless you allow them to influence it. And once you grasp that, once you fully embrace that and understand that, you will never be plagued by some negative effect. I remember back to being a kid and how at times I thought my life as a young man was a literal horror, you know? I had a Boy Scout leader that was just absolutely the worst adult human being on the planet that I think I ever met. And the only person that was worse than him was his bully son. And maybe it's how I grew up, the reason I grew up the way I grew up, you know, being the master of my destiny, if you will, because I just, in looking back at that, I reached a point in my life where it was just no more, no more. And I took charge of the moment for me. And then I, you know, did what I did, going to school, you know, going into the Army, being a Ranger, doing all the things I did, distinguished honor graduate of every school I ever went to in the US military. Every one, without fail. Why? Am I smarter than everybody else? No, I don't think so. You know, what did I do? I took charge of the moment. I took charge of what I am in charge of, me now. And I would never let myself be bullied like I was. Back in those days, you know, with that Scoutmaster and that Boy Scout troop with that Boy Scout son of his. I mean, lie about you, set you up, torture you, you know, bully you, all the crap that would go on. And I mean, I'm not just sharing it with you, you know. that I did not have this, this infallible past. I had this, you know, childhood that was just wrought with all kinds of things like this, you know? And so can you be affected by people negatively? Yeah, if you let them. But no remote viewer out over here can affect you here. They do not have that power or that ability. They just don't. They might like you to think that they do, and that might be part of their game that they're trying to run on you. But listen to me and look at me. They don't. They do not have more power or ability than you have. You are the master of you. Truly, absolutely, undeniably, irrefutably. And I will be very proud of you when you recognize that in yourself. Next question.
Great. We have a couple questions from someone by the name of Marina. The first one is, what do you think of hemisync technologies? And does it improve cooldown?
Yeah, I mean, it's, for those of you that don't know, the Monroe Institute uses a process called hemispherical synchronization, or hemisync for short. And pardon me, there are two former members of the remote viewing unit that that worked for and with, and then there have been also, it's Joe McMonagle and Skip Atwater. There are also some people that were students of mine in remote viewing that either work for or spend a good deal of time at the Monroe Institute using the hemisync technology. The concept behind it, and I might be straying with my own opinion here. If I am, I don't mean to be, you know, shortchanging the Monroe Institute. There were a lot of hemisync tapes around the unit when I was going through my training in coordinate remote viewing. And I used them a lot. And they had Russian language tapes. They had cooldown tapes. They had a whole bunch of different stuff. Does it enhance cooldown? Yeah, I mean, we employ it in our own cooldown tapes. We use binaural beat in the cooldown tape, and that binaural beat plays at a subliminal level, a subaudible level in the cooldown tape. And what's over the top of it is just a yogic relaxation and, you know, mind and body meditation. And then the binaural beat is layered down inside of that. And so the idea there is that the binaural beat entrains the left and the right hemisphere of the brain and causes it to synchronize and achieve a theta wave state or a delta wave state, all of it depending upon what the focus of that particular tape is, or CD now, or MP3, I guess. Do I think it enhances? Yes. Would I endorse it? Yes. As I said, we employ it in our technology. So yeah, it's good stuff. Now, I also want to, my disclaimer is that you have to be very confident in, I have no reason not to be confident in the Monroe Institute, but anytime you're dealing with something that has subliminal messaging in it, you must trust your source because subliminal messaging is a very powerful technique and tool. And so you have to trust that whoever is preparing the tape and doing the subliminal messaging, that it's the right message for the right person at the right time and in the right way. If you think that it might not be that, then don't use it. And I think you get my drift there, right? And like I said, I've never had any experience with the Monroe Institute doing something different. I would trust them completely, but you have to trust them, not me. So think about that.
Great. She's also wondering if you have any advice for people who look for lost animals.
Same story. It's the same answer. I mean, it's, how are you going to look for it? Now you got to start asking a question. What are you going to do? Are you going to be describing the environment of the animal? Are you going to say that you're going to be stepping into the mind of the animal? I know there are people that do that, that make that claim. So you're going to step into the mind of the animal, start to describe the emotion, the thoughts, what the animal is seeing, what the animal is experiencing. Is the animal afraid? Is it sated? Is it, is it hungry? Is it cold? Is it, what is it, or are you just going to describe the environment? Are you going to describe where it might be, what the dimensions are? Is it cold there? Is it hot there? Is it dark there? Is it bright there? Is it in a vehicle moving, or is it, in the wide open spaces? These are things that you have to ask yourself. So the answer to the question, can it be used to find a lost pet? Yes. The question is, what's the technique going to be? How are you going to do it? How are you going to employ it? And is everybody on your team going to have a way and an understanding of being able to do that, right? So when you've got a team that understands what they're all going to do and how they're going to do it, can you apply it and use the tool? Yes, sure you can. Okay.
Right. Great. Can you speak to the study of a second language and how that can be used to help with your remote viewing?
That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that. I would think that part of mastering a language is learning to think in the language that you're attempting to master. So I would think that that being able to step into the mind of, let's say, if you're trying to learn Russian, that being able to step into the mind of a Russian and to be able to think and feel what that individual is. But there again, it would be, now how do you find somebody to do that with? You're just going to pick somebody out of the blue? Well, that won't work. So you need to maybe have a partner that you're going to share that with. Maybe you have a Russian that wants to learn to speak English. Maybe you, as an English speaker, want to learn to speak Russian. So now you pair yourselves up and you work, each stepping into the mind of the other and working exercises to attempt to learn to speak the language by thinking the language. Now, I've never seen it employed that way, but it makes sense to me that that would be a way in which to use it to do that. But it would require a great deal of cooperation and forward thinking into how you were going to make that happen. But yeah, it would very definitely work.
Great. We have a question from a gentleman by the name of Richard. He'd like to know, in the case of a brain injury that affects the ability to write or draw, do you have any advice for how they can pursue remote viewing?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. The issue would be modalities of perception. If you have traumatic brain injury that has removed some modality of perception, so you're obviously you can't sketch or you can't write, but what can you do? Can you speak? So if you can speak, can you use Corti remote viewing in that way? Absolutely. What would you do? Turn on a tape recorder. My perceptions of the target. I see this color. I feel this temperature. I hear this noise. I feel frightened. Aesthetically, this is a very pleasing place. There's tremendous amount of rushing sounds like water rushing, or maybe it's my imagination. Maybe it's AOL. It's the wind. I see a lot of translucent, vibrant colors. You see where I'm going with it? So maybe your modality of perception is that you cannot use your hand to objectify this 8-dimensional waveform data. So let's go back to the mechanism of coordinate remote viewing. In coordinate remote viewing, you are detecting and decoding, detecting and decoding, detecting and decoding. The detecting and decoding is being done here. It's being done in the waveform expression of the target distant in space-time. You're here, but you are in this omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent role of detecting something distant in space-time. So you're detecting it, and then you are decoding it. Your brain, despite being injured, your brain detects waveform expressions of data and then decodes it at the speed of thought, faster than the speed of light. So detecting it, you sense the waveform expression of colors, of temperatures, of tastes, of smells, of sounds, dimensions, textures, all of the sensory data, regardless of the modality being used here. You are detecting it and you are decoding it. Now, as you decode it, the objective here is how are you objectifying it? If you cannot use your hands to objectify it by sketching or writing it or doing something else, then you have only to figure out what other modality you're going to use for objectifying the waveform expression data. Follow? So you're detecting and decoding. So now I'm assuming you can speak. If you can speak, you speak. You speak it into a recorder. I hear this, I see this, I feel this, I smell this, I taste this, and so forth and so on. And there again, different modalities of perception, even if you're speaking it, those modalities of perception, some will peak and some others will not. Even though you're not writing it down, you still might be really horrible as a gustatory or auditory perceiver, right? You may still struggle with not being able to hear sounds or taste tastes. So you then have to figure out another way to describe it. So how do you describe the taste of a strawberry if you have never tasted a strawberry before, right? Will you still be able to describe it as a remote viewer? It's questionable, right? If you have no reference, no point of reference, nah, you probably won't. If you've never tasted a strawberry before, how could you possibly taste a strawberry? Now, let's say that you have never tasted a strawberry before, but you have tasted a very ripe papaya. So now you're detecting and decoding, and you say, well, it's this red, soft, fleshy, edible thing that smells maybe tart, but it has kind of the same texture as maybe a papaya, you know, that analytical overlay is like a papaya, and it's sweet, but I don't know what else to describe it other than it's sweet and juicy like a papaya, has a similar fleshy texture to it, different color though, it's red, it's got little spots on it kind of thing, that kind of stuff. So what I'm doing here for you is just kind of working through different modalities of perception, because I don't want to just throw it out there. I want you to understand how you're really going through the process of doing it, and how we've used, you have to remember, we have taught remote people to remote view. We taught a blind, deaf man in San Francisco who had to put his hands, he had the people that were signing had a completely different signing. Signing is a language in and of itself, right? It's not English. Signing is signing. It's its own language. It's not English. But he had to, because he couldn't see and couldn't hear, he had to have the person use an entirely different language of signing in the palm of his hand. Can you imagine? That guy learned how to remote view. And he struggled only temporarily with sorting out what his modality of perception was going to be. Here's a guy who's never been able to see, never been able to hear, but was still able to describe things because he would have to sign back. He was signing back things that he could describe wind by how it flashed against his face. He'd never heard the wind, but he knew different intensities of wind, and he knew how to describe different intensities of wind and temperatures of wind using signing when all he could do was feel it on his skin. So there are no limitations with this. None whatsoever. The only limitations are whatever you would assign for yourself. We also taught a number of deaf students to coordinate remote view, to be coordinate remote viewers and extended remote viewers. And there again, I mean, I speak fast anyway, but I completely wore out signers. You know, we'd have to have signers come up, and I could speak so darn fast, poor people. But it was not the people that were deaf that could not hear, that to them could not hear or speak. To them, it was not a challenge. It was another way to communicate. It was another way to describe for the world what they were perceiving. I mean, to them, it was just another blessing for them. That's kind of how they saw it. Another blessing, another tool. Outstanding. Wish we had known about it before, you know? So yeah, traumatic brain injury, you can still use this.
That's great. A gentleman by the name of Roger would like to know if you ever worked with Russell Targ.
I have not ever worked with Russell Targ. I have not. I know of him. I know that he taught at the Omega Institute when I was teaching at the Omega Institute. He has a different idea around teaching remote viewing than I do. But no, I've never worked with him.
Okay. A gentleman by the name of Gordon would like to know if you have any plans to return to the UK, or can you recommend any RV organization that they could join in the UK?
I wish I could say that I do know something in the UK. I don't. I'm not opposed to going back to the UK to teach again. Again, it always takes somebody in country to organize stuff to make it happen. We've done that. We've done it. It's difficult. It's a difficult road to walk to get there, to find a location, and then to do it. We've had people that supported it and helped us make it happen. We had people who said they would and then didn't. So it's been good and bad, but we're going to go back and start teaching this again. I mean, that's the whole reason for doing these lectures now and launching these online courses and doing the courses in Vancouver, doing the course in Toronto. It is my intention within the next year or so to be back again around the world teaching wherever and whenever we can get a course put together and launch it. Yeah.
This is a question from a former student by the name of John. He took the course back in 1999, and he loved the music. He's wondering if there exists a music list from when he might have taken the course, or if you could throw something together.
Sure, we can throw something together. From 1999, where was he when he learned it? That would help. Sweden, or
I think it was in Europe. It was before my time.
Germany. Well, yeah, we can put something together. I mean, I don't know if it would be what we were doing in '99, but we still have those big folders, Jay, don't we? Those big folders of CDs.
Yeah, absolutely. You could throw together a blog post of some of your favorites.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. I know no promises on time, John, but yeah, we'll do that for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the med bed? I've not heard of that myself.
Is it something for remote viewing, MedBed?
Not sure. I don't see any other context. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's just some sort of device called the med bed.
Huh. Well, while we're figuring that out, what's the next question?
Okay. Let's jump over to one of the live questions. A gentleman by the name of Michael says that there's another remote viewing teacher who is predicting a nuclear disaster in the US. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, look, I can guess who you might be talking about. That's not important, but there are some people who claim to be remote viewers who were not remote viewers. They were monitors trained to be remote viewers, but didn't serve in the capacity of being remote viewers, and who have basically made a living making predictions of gloom and doom. And, you know, what do I think of it? I mean, it's like, okay. So the guy makes a prediction of a nuclear disaster. I don't know, maybe you watch Chernobyl on HBO. I mean, I don't know. I don't have, you know, I don't wake up in the morning and, you know, I don't have any premonitions of disasters for us as a people in the United States. I think we run the risk of having any kind of thing or all kinds of things happen to us. I mean, you know, terrorist attacks or planes going down or nuclear accident. I mean, you know, sure. Is it possible? Absolutely. Would I rely on remote viewing to be the predictor of that? Absolutely not. Because I've already said, never trust the results of a single remote viewer operating independently of other remote viewers. And why do we not do that? Because remote viewing is not 100% accurate. Never has been, never will be. So those two rules right there preclude you from following or ducking or running around and laying claim to have knowledge of something negative that's going to happen and call it right or good in any way, shape, or form. So I would not put any stock in it at all. It has as much potential of happening as, you know, of a nuclear, of a vehicle carrying nuclear material, you know, getting in an accident, drop nuclear material all over the road. You know, there are organizations in the United States that do that. I mean, nuclear warheads and nuclear material is shuttled from places to places and other things. You know, it's always out there. It's always on the road, and anything could have happened. There are safety measures that are put into place and highly skilled people that are part of that mechanism. But a nuclear accident or a nuclear incident has as much chance of happening just as a part of the normal routine of that organization as it does of any remote viewer turning around and saying, I make a prediction of a nuclear incident in the United States. So I mean, I'm not trying to say something negative. I'm trying to answer this in a way that you'll get it, that I would not put any kind of stock in that kind of stuff, because you can't trust remote, you know, one remote viewer operating independently of other remote viewers, and remote viewing is not 100% accurate. So, what did this person see? What did they see? They just see it while they were staring into their coffee in the morning, or what? Or they did a remote viewing session and they did it. Well, there's 2 rules violated right there. So those 2 rules violated, discount anything that person produces. So that's what I would say about that. I would not get my underwear in a wad over that prediction at all.
Okay. Here's a question. People are always interested in your opinion on this. Are other worlds likely to physically interact with us in the foreseeable future?
I hope so. I mean, yes, I hope so. I mean, I know that they are out there, and I know that we have seen them, and I know that we have interacted with them. I know this. I'm not dreaming it, and I'm not, speculating it. And I've seen people that I really respect a great deal who have played a role in helping me understand that and embrace it. And I've also seen people who attempt to help me understand and embrace it who I don't respect at all. So I can tell you from my experience that it's out there. And yeah, we are already interacting on some level. Some of it is simply a waveform expression, mind to mind, technology to technology, being to being. It's out there, and it's going, I know that it is there. I don't know when or how or why, or there's going to be some, breakthrough with that. I make no prediction about that. I can just tell you that if you train with us, that we will give you an opportunity to dabble in that, if you will, using some historical references to it. And so it's a lot of fun. There again, it's not 100% accurate, and I make no bones about that. You can dabble in it because we do it as part of the learning process, and people really get a kick out of it. And what's so amazing is that over the years, in doing this target or that target or that target, the amount of data that shows up that was produced 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, and here it is showing up again and again and again. It's just astounding when you see it, and it's really cool. And we've done things like in the master remote viewing class, we've done things like we've sent people out on a target. We don't know where this place is or why it is, but we will send, as a remote viewing target, send you there and ask you to come back and describe a technology that you see there. And we'll give people modeling stuff to do that with, clays and sticks and erector stuff and things. And people come back with amazing things, and they sit there and go, well, this is what I saw, and this is what it does, and here's how it does it. And they will describe the science behind it, the mechanisms behind it, just amazing concepts that they'll come up with. And it's like a person that has no formal training in medicine or in science or any of those kinds of things, and they'll come up with some amazing description of a technology that they saw in another place with another being. And you'll get those kinds of opportunities to do that. So yeah, no predictions, but they're out there. They're out there. We are not alone. I think you'd have to be a fool to think we are. I really think you would have to be a fool, confused fool, to think that we are alone in this universe, or that this universe is alone, that there are not other universes.
That's great.
I mean, when you understand what we teach in the physics of the metaphysics, and you understand what I mean when I tell you that you are omnipotent and omniscient, omnipresent, and I'll describe that to you. You'll understand it, you'll get it. When you grasp that notion that our universe is finite, if our universe is in fact finite, then what's it in? It's a pretty powerful thought. But you'll grasp that. If you do this, you'll grasp it. I promise.
Right. We can go to a live question. A gentleman by the name of John has his hand up. So John, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask your question. Are you there?
Hey, John.
Are you there?
I think not.
No, you might not have been ready. All right, let me jump back to the question list here. Gentleman by the name of Burl would like to know if you could describe the best RV session you've ever personally experienced or seen someone else do.
Everybody asks that question. Not everybody, but it gets asked every lecture. Every session that I do, to me, is more powerful than the one I did before. I mean, I am so in love with this reality that this is ours, that each and every one of us have this ability, that I am just in love with it. And for me, it's not a remote viewing session anymore. It is a way of life. It is how I see the world. I see the world through a different lens at once I learned to do this. I mean, it stopped being, I mean, we don't want you to be coordinate remote viewers all the time. We want you to get past coordinate remote viewing. Coordinate remote viewing serves a very definitive purpose. It's there for a specific reason. Again, I shared that with you at the beginning of this talk that we're having here, that it is the one that gives you, by following this protocol, you do this, if that, then this, if this, then that, and back and forth following this protocol. And you get from A to B to Z by following this protocol. But we want you to get to the place where that is behind you. That is the thing that gives you this irrefutable, undeniable evidence that you are more than the physical. That's the whole reason that it's there. So once you get to this place of knowing that you have an ability to transcend space and time, to view persons, places, or things remote in space and time, and to report in, information, carry it back with you. Once you know that, then you don't need coordinate remote viewing anymore. Now, next is extended. Next is not even extended remote viewing, because even that becomes too restrictive, and that becomes too defined. You want to be in this place where you are seeing perfectly all the time, where you are connected, omnipresent, omniscient, all the time. Not just when you decide that, oh, I'm going to do a session now and I'm going to focus on something. Yeah, can you do that? Yes. Can you set that aside and do that as a special focused moment of intensity to do that? Yes, of course you can. But you should be connected all the time. You should know things without knowing why you know them constantly. While you're driving, while you're sitting in a doctor's office, while you're walking with your partner, while you're wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you should be connected all the time, not just some of the time. And when you're connected all the time, then you're going to be where I want you to be. That's when we are truly going to start shifting human consciousness. When we are walking connected all the time. You are already, you just don't know it. You just don't accept that, so many of you. So many of you just won't accept it. You just really think that you've got to set down, dust yourself off, go into an altered state of consciousness, and then start really plugging away at producing this data. No, 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 you don't. You'll be in this place where you are constantly walking this path into the matrix field. It is the flow of data in waveform expression is just always there. You're just opening your eyes over here and then over here and over here and over here. It's always there. That's when you are, I don't care, you want to call it in the zone? Okay, in the zone. How many times have you heard athletes or racing drivers or somebody else talk about that? I mean, that's where I want you to be all the time. When that is where we are as a species, as a people, that is when we will start to truly shift the direction that this planet is going. That is when we will start interstellar travel. That is when that will happen. That's when we will have our ability, that's when we will grasp from the infinite flow of data in the matrix field. That's when we'll grasp and start engineering the spaceship that will take us to the distant solar system. That's when that'll happen. It will not be, it's just like Eli Calloway before he passed away. He went through remote viewing and training with me. And he and another engineer by the name of Heston, who's passed away now, who was both of these men, fantastic engineers, one of golf clubs and the other of orbital engines that power open water freighters, of the hydraulics that support the landing gear on 757s, that kind of thing, those kinds of men and women. And they both admitted that the reason remote viewing was no stretch for them, that it was not something that they had to reach for and embrace to embrace it. They knew that they did not see these things and engineer these things because they got it out of a book. It didn't come from the classroom. There was not a teacher that stood up in front of them and taught them anything that allowed them to design the next great golf club or the next great orbital engine. That all came from these periods where they were floating, drifting, mindless, matterless, in this place of an altered state of consciousness, you know, where Heston would pick up a cup of tea and the tea would grow cold before he would finish his thought and take a sip, you know, had it in his hand and would then begin connecting. And then by the time he took a sip, it was ice cold. And he would be sketching on tablecloths and other things because he just was capturing this flow of data. And it came from another place, another world. That's exactly what he would say. This didn't come from an engineering book or an engineering class. This did not come from a team of engineers. This came from me seeing and feeling something that then a team of engineers validated, or we validated my mathematics, my science from a book, but it's not how I perceived it. How I perceived it was in an altered state of consciousness. That's how I grasped it. Same thing with Eli Calloway. And Eli Calloway's son, who was does Callaway Corvettes. For those of you that are Corvette fans, you know Callaway Corvettes. You can take a $100,000 car, Corvette car, give it to Callaway and give him another $100,000, and he'll make you a Callaway Corvette. But you know, he comes up with designs and engineering concepts for his racing cars that come from another place, come from another dimension. They don't come from, you know, they don't come from a book. or a photograph or an idea. It comes from something different. So all of us have this ability. It is inherent within each and every one of us. None of us any better than the rest of us. Just some of us have reached a point in our life where we've had this experience where we've created something and not known really how we created it. And then once we've done that, then, you know, we've captured the concept, and then our life has just shifted from there. It's never been the same again. That's where I want you to be with remote viewing, is get to that place. And you all will if you stick with it, if you do it, if you embrace it the way you need to embrace it, you'll be there with it. And it will flow to you. What do I do next? It'll come. What am I supposed to focus on? Next, it's going to be there. You'll know. You'll go to sleep. You'll wake up in the morning and the answer will be there. You will have seen it through the night. You will have dreamt it, lived it, been there, embraced it, saw it, followed it, was there in the picture. And it'll never be the same for you then. And that's where I want all of us to be, because that's when we will truly, truly, I know I'm being repetitive now, that is when we will start shifting human consciousness here. That's when we will start connecting this planet with the other planets that we are supposed to connect with the other beings that we're supposed to connect with. But until we get to that place, till we measure up, till we have done our homework and put ourselves in that place, it's not going to be there for us. It's not going to be spoon-fed to us. And that's what I know about all of that. I'm sorry I wandered off on that question, but you got another question?
That's great. Yeah, we'll do another question and then try taking another live call-in question. A couple people from the old Omega days are asking what might be different or new in the upcoming classes from when they took it back then.
Nothing. Nothing. I'm older, hair's grayer. I mean, the technology with which we teach the class will be different, and targets will all be different, you know. But other than that, if you're going to take another coordinated remote viewing course, it's going to be another coordinated remote viewing course. You know, we still teach it the same way, and yeah, I will never vary from that. So you have to decide if you're going to repeat or you're going to go to the next step, take the next class. I don't know. I don't know what's best for you. I don't know where you are in it. That's something you'll have to decide.
Okay. Let's go ahead and unmute a gentleman by the name of Guy.
Hey, Guy.
No, don't seem to be able to. Sorry, are you there?
Hey, can you hear me? G'day, Dave. Oh, you're looking good. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Welcome from Australia. I just wanted to touch base. I did remote viewing of what, nearly 19 years ago, and it actually morphed. The remote viewing morphed with me, and it was really quite remarkable. And I ended up with some really incredible experiences. I won't go into them today, but one of them brought to attention to me that because we don't know where this can go, and especially connecting with people on the levels that we can actually connect to things, anything actually, with this. I had a couple of interesting experiences which frightened me almost, and I'm curious. I don't know if I learned it properly, but what is a good, clear way to absolutely disconnect from a target? To make sure that you don't carry that target with you subliminally or somewhere in yourself through the day if you don't want it, or through the night, or even past through the weeks.
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's easy for me to say it, and that is that you're in charge of it. So you have to reground yourself, and you have to purposefully disconnect from it. If you find that you can't, or that you're having difficulty with it, then you just need to be more deliberate about your process of doing it. You need to thoroughly separate yourself from it and understand that you are in charge of that process, that the target cannot suck you back in. you're allowing yourself to be sucked back into it. It's hard for us to embrace that idea that we are playing some role there in allowing it to continue to happen. And it's hard because we want to say, no, I'm in charge, and I said no, and I mean no, and I don't want it to be there. But there's something about it that it's causing us to go back and do loop into this thing again. So I don't know if it was something that was a big emotional impact for you, or what it might have been, but you, my friend, have the ability. You are all powerful in this process. And so you just make it your devotion, your dedication, maybe your mantra. Maybe you make it, you thought incubate this when you go to sleep at night, that I am going to disengage from this and never go back again. Or I am going to disengage from this and only take from this what I can powerfully use to my advantage, right? I'm going to take from this something that I will use to remind myself not to do this or not to do that, or, not to weaken myself in this capacity. I'm just spitballing ideas for you there, but that's kind of how you have to do it. You have to just figure out how you're going to ground yourself from it. And a number of ways to do that is to figure out how you're going to divert your attention away from that thing which keeps dragging you back. And maybe it's going to have to be trying to find something to replace it, or maybe it's going to be trying to find what it is you think that keeps making you come back there to that, and then deliberately chuck that out, get rid of it, or look at that and find what you can take from that that will empower you in where you are now and where you're going to be tomorrow and the next day and the next day. I mean, I don't know how many of my personal stories I shared with you, but a lot of people know that, I was sexually molested when I was a young guy, a very young man, 10 years old, 9, 10 years old. And the way that I never go back there in my head is I recall from that experience what I took from that changed the dynamic of who I am as a man and as a human being, and what I took from that made me stronger, more resolved to never allow that to happen, to not allow that to happen to my family, to my children, to me, or to anyone else, those kinds of things. And so my entire life, much of my life, I should say, was defined by not ever weakening myself to that experience again, that I only take what's strong from that experience for me. So those are some ideas that I would try to employ. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's positive. Where you seem to be going to is absolutely convincingly positive affirmation on and focus. It's like you seem to be focusing, and draw that focus back. Because when these happened for me, I didn't even realize that I was still connected. I had no idea, and clearly I haven't put enough focus into drawing back, focusing on the now, and then going on with life. And thank you for that, Dave.
Of course, you're such a strong, powerful human being. We don't give ourselves credit for the strength and the power that we actually have. Nothing can dominate you out there. Nothing.
Thank you, David.
Your voice, who you are and what you are. I mean, I can picture your face, so I hope I see you again sometime soon.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
You bet. More questions?
Yeah, let's go to another live question. We have someone by the name of Donna. I'll go ahead and unmute you. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, thank goodness. I did, because I had to use a speaker in my, thank you for taking the question. It might be an unusual question, but because of some of my experiences and some of the other people that I know who, I don't do exactly remote viewing, I think perhaps the way some people teach it, but have you ever experienced anything like the time shifts when you were doing in a remote viewing?
Can you describe for me what it is that you're experiencing?
Well, I'll have some times where I'm, trying to pick some things up, like say the clock says 5:25. And then when I feel, I can't explain what I feel, but then if they'll go back and look at the clock, it might say 5:20. Or sometimes like the time may jump ahead to another, like by 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I've talked to other people that I know that they've had some similar type experiences. So I don't know if sometimes I think I'm going crazy, or unless there's really something going on that I don't quite understand.
No, you're not going crazy. And I think probably what you're doing is, I think you're just losing track of time because you're in an altered state of consciousness, either deliberately or accidentally, which can happen. And then, when you're in that altered state of consciousness, you're subconsciously focusing on something else. And then when your consciousness comes back again into the present moment, you've noticed now that you lost an hour or 15 minutes, or hopefully that doesn't happen frequently. And it doesn't happen when you're driving. You don't want that to happen. But that's what I think is probably going on with you. And I think any and all of us who dabble in going into an altered state of consciousness, changing our brainwave states by design, for different reasons. And then, shifting back again, you're going from theta to delta, and delta back to theta, back to alpha, and different stuff. And the more you're doing that and not being deliberate about getting yourself back into conscious focus in the moment, that I think that you can jump around and miss blocks of time. I hope that answer helps.
No, it does. It does help a lot, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of it.
Well, I'm not afraid of it. I just,
You're not going crazy.
no, because like I said, I've had other people that have had the same experiences as me. And as a matter of fact, because I live in Las Vegas, and going by Area 51, where I was picking up some things, I actually lost like about an hour and a half of time. Actually gained an hour and a half of time. And I didn't know what was, so I don't know. So anyway, but thank you.
Yeah, stay away from Area 51.
Good idea. Thank you so much.
You bet. More questions?
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep taking some live questions. I have a gentleman by the name of Richard. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Richard, are you there? Richard? No. All right, I'm going to go down to...
Hello?
Oh, there. Yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to the staff and to David, and obviously everything's gone through. I've sent a couple of emails. You may or may not be able to pick it up on my voice, but I actually have what's called an ABI, or acquired brain injury. And unfortunately, that's limited dramatically my motor functional skills, in particular fine motor skills such as writing, drawing, and etc. So as much as I have gone through your information and listened to seminars and even tried to expand more and gone through some more of your texts and YouTube videos and what have you to get a larger grasp of what's going on. I was fortunate, as I had put it out in one of my emails to you, that yes, I also experienced a life-death scenario, and technically I was clinically dead 4 times. One time I was actually on life support, brain dead for about a fortnight. They turned off everything and I started working again, funnily enough. So there's obviously a reason why I'm still here after so many times I've had issues occur to me where I should be dead. And in my experience, I have had, once again, seen and experienced beings, angels, ghouls, demons, the whole spectrum of being able to see and feel or even have inner sensory perception of future events which have actually come into experience itself. Therefore, within me, there is obviously a lot of potential. Unfortunately, by your protocols, I can't therefore renovate that into a replicable scenario and put it into the same context. Therefore, what I'm asking, is it possible to somehow engage the two and try and create a system in which I can therefore convey my experiences and what have you, and put it into a format that is therefore reproducible and scientifically proven?
Yeah, of course. I think I addressed your question earlier in the program because, well, or someone asked a similar question. And I said that if your modality of your ability to detect and decode the data, even with a brain injury, even though you can't type or write very easily, you can't sketch, those kinds of things, you can still speak. So one of the ways in which I would suggest that you might want to do coordinate remote viewing is you can still take the coordinates and you won't produce an ideogram, but the ideogram that you're going to produce will be something that will just be mental. It'll be in your head. And so you would just call out the ideogram. You would just describe in your mind what the ideogram is doing. You would then describe what you're hearing. You would record this using a tape recorder. And you could record and say, my perceptions of the target are, I smell this, I see this, I feel that. You're going through the entire structure of stage 1, of stage 2, stage 3, everything would lend itself to a modified version of this by just speaking it, articulating it. Your entire process would be just through speaking it and recording it. You could produce the same amount of targeting data as a person without brain injury that would be, writing and sketching. You would just be describing it verbally. Does that make sense?
Of course. So therefore, I need to have my monitor really to become a recorder of what comes to me.
Right, exactly.
Basically, the format.
Yeah, you could still follow the structure. You
Yeah.
could still follow the structure of coordinate remote viewing, but you would, again, instead of attempting, remember the detecting and decoding process
Yeah.
is objectified by a person doesn't have brain injury. They're detecting and decoding mentally, and then they're objectifying two-dimensionally on the page using their ability to sketch and to write. You would detect and decode all in your mind, but you would verbally articulate. That would be your objectification. So you would capture that all in writing. So you would say stage one, I feel the ideogram does this, rises up sharply, angle across, and, the A, B, C components you go through, then, you go through your stage twos, you start describing what you're hearing, the temperatures, everything you're feeling. You just say stage two and then go through it. Yeah, I mean, you would just be modifying. And we've done this with deaf students. We've done this with blind students, blind and deaf students. So there's always a way to objectify the data. It would just be different for you, but you would still be able to participate fully in the process, as far as I'm concerned.
That's fantastic news. I appreciate your help.
Sure. Just verbalize it. Just articulate it.
Just keep the proposed item, once again, by both parties indiscriminate. It has to be something that neither one of us would know anything about. Is that true? That's about it?
I would believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for the question. I hope it helped. What's next, Jay?
Let's see. We have a couple of people are asking the difference between coordinate and extended remote viewing.
Yeah, coordinate remote viewing is the process it follows a 6-stage structure. So if you get the book, let me see, it's, hold on a second. You want to get this book. It's on Amazon. You can get it there. If you take a class, we provide it to you as part of the class. Anyway, it has a Cooldown CD in the back of it. If you get the audio version of this book, or the audio, there's an audio version of something that's out there. It does not have, it doesn't have a Cooldown CD. So
I'll jump in. There's not an audio book version that I know of that. There's an ebook version. And we do make the CD available as a download on the website for people who get the ebook version.
Okay, there you go. But this is coordinate remote viewing. That is the Bible. That is everything that you need to know about coordinate remote viewing. Extended remote viewing does not utilize this protocol. Extended remote viewing is an advanced form of the phenomenon that uses a different brainwave state entirely. You use a different posture. You use a blindfold on your eyes. There's a whole different mechanism for doing it. You're taught a mechanism of mind mapping. You use focus questions, all different. It's a whole different process altogether. You need to know and understand coordinate remote viewing before you do extended remote viewing. You can't just jump into extended remote viewing. You have to be given this undeniable, irrefutable evidence that you are capable of seeing beyond the physical. And that's why coordinate remote viewing always comes before extended remote viewing. And I will never vary that whatsoever. Once you know that there was something more than the physical, beyond the physical, then you jump into the extended remote viewing. We teach you an entirely different process, which is devoid of the protocol and the structure. It's far less limiting. It's more like flying. It's more like, flying through the darkness and describing what it is you're seeing and feeling and sensing. And coming back out of the session and using this mind mapping technique to capture all of the data that you perceived during the session. Because since you're not following a protocol, you're detecting and decoding, but you're not taking pen and putting it on paper and capturing. You're not decoding right there. You're not objectifying, rather, two-dimensionally on paper. So you're going uninterrupted through this process of moving into this altered state of consciousness, of visiting the target site and seeing the target. And then when you come out and we take you into the cool down process of you're actually coming out of the session, right? There's a session music that we bring you back up into conscious mind again. And you then start using the protocol just for capturing the data at that time, but not during the session. During the session, it is free flow, free flying, floating through the target to capture the information, and then coming back in and putting it on the page afterwards. And those are the distinct differences. You must do one before the other. Other questions?
Great. We have someone who's asking if you can elaborate on the other turnings, I guess referring to the fourth turning concept.
There's a destructive phase, a rebuilding phase. I'm sorry, now that you asked me that, there are two other phases and I can't think of them right now. I must be getting tired. But anyway, we move through these four phases. And if you just Google the four turnings or the fourth turning, there are any number of websites out there where people are talking about it. But what I want you to know is that the amount of time that we spend as a species, as humans, in each of these turnings is all dependent upon what we do as a species in those turnings. So the destructive phase, the fourth turning, can be long and protracted, drawn out, painful, right? Catastrophic. Or we can unite, we can focus, we can powerfully move through the now, through the moment, and focus to the other side to shift humanity, and we can contract the fourth turning so that we leave it and get into the rebuilding phase more quickly. Then we can stay in the rebuilding phase longer so we can build more carefully, more powerfully, and then we will be in the phase where we are living and enjoying that phase, and then we will be in the unraveling phase where we start to unravel everything that we have created, everything. The sustainment phase is the other one. So we go through destructive to rebuilding to sustainment to unraveling to destructive to rebuilding to sustainment to unraveling to destructive to rebuilding. There we go again. We just keep cycling and cycling and cycling through. There's a given set amount of time that it takes for us to move, an average for us to go through all of those turnings. But as I said, it can, by each of the turnings being elongated or contracted, we can cause the four turnings to take a longer period of time or a shorter period of time. We can be very short in the destructive very short in the unraveling, and very long in the rebuilding and the sustainment phase. It's all up to us. It starts with us as individuals, how we live our lives. And as we live our lives as individuals, so will the collective begin to live its collective life. So as we live as individuals, so will the collective, and so forth and so on. And you must accept that. It's why, you know, I frequently lecture to youth, and in so doing, I am watching young people taking up arms and ideas and energy and emotion, all about, you know, trying to do away with this unraveling and the destructive phase and going to change all of these things, but not 1 ounce of effort or thought about self. You cannot change the collective if you have not mastered self. And will you ever master self completely? No. But can you be better today than you were yesterday? Yes. Can you be better tomorrow than you were today? Yes, you can. So as we focus and as we build and improve and perfect self, master our thoughts, master our emotions, master our health, master all of these things, that what we will then be able to do is it's sympathetic resonance. The individual brings the collective along, sympathetic resonance. As one waveform forms and it gets more powerful, it picks up and trains the other waveforms. So it starts off with a single that becomes a double, becomes a triple, quadruple, and so forth and so on. And that's how it goes. So as we are talking as older folks, as we do frequently, and we're counseling youth who have this idea that they're going to shift the world and make it a better place, then they must embrace the notion that that begins with them. And that as they work on them, as they perfect them, as they master them, that then they will begin to entrain the whole rest of the world. Slowly it will come along. You will bring it up out of the destructive phase and bring it into this rebuilding phase. And hopefully we can sustain this rebuilding phase and then move into the sustainment phase where we will sustain that for a prolonged period. And then as it starts to unravel, don't let it unravel over a very long period of time. Get it done, pass through the destructive phase and get back into the rebuilding phase again. Those are my theories with it. That's how I live my life. That's what I attempt to do with it. And everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to master self better today than I was yesterday so that I can hopefully entrain others so that we can shift the collective. It will just never happen any other way. It just will not. Other questions?
Great. We have someone who's wondering if you have any plans to go on coast to coast to promote any of your work.
I don't know. I've never had a relationship with Coast to Coast. When Art Bell was alive, he never asked me to be on. I did go on with 2 or 3 times with another host. I was on with him. I can't remember who he was now, but it's been years ago. But I'm always happy to go on and talk to people. So I guess all they have to do is ask me. But never been asked, other than with the one host that did ask me.
Great. There's 2 questions. They're somewhat similar here. The first one is, do psychic abilities help a person in this process? And are the techniques similar? And adding to that, how do other disciplines relate to the practice of remote viewing? And do you support learning other disciplines?
I can't speak for any other disciplines. And when you start talking about psychic ability, the answer I will give you is this: it depends. If you're in a class to learn remote viewing, then learn remote viewing. If you come to the class that's supposed to be learning to remote view, and you want to use your natural psychic ability to do something else, then you're not learning remote viewing. And typically what will happen is you will be in conflict with yourself. You'll be in conflict with trying to learn the protocol of remote viewing, but saying that, you know, I didn't get that because, you know, my psychic ability told me to do this or told me to do that. I mean, you have to be there for the purpose of learning the one, put the other one aside, learn the one. When you get to the other side of that, then decide if the one that you just learned is going to be your new protocol, or if you're going to go back to doing what you did. I don't know what you do. I don't know what being a psychic, claiming psychic ability does. You're far better off to claim no psychic ability, to follow the protocol and see what happens, than you are to claim psychic ability, then step in and be in conflict with the protocol and not produce data that you would like to produce. And I've seen all kinds. I've seen a guy teaching a class. I was teaching a class in Sweden and got in and got through the lecture and got ready to do their first stage 1, 2, and 3 target. And I came into the classroom. Everybody was supposed to be ready, have their paper and their pens, and be ready to start. We're going to start the cool down, and we're going to do their first target. And I looked down at this individual, and he's got a crystal. He has a crystal in a band that's around his head, and he has a crystal stuck in the band around his head. And then he has 2 big giant crystals, and he has them right over his femoral arteries in his lap. And it was like, seriously? I mean, you came here to learn remote viewing. So the protocol of remote viewing is what will teach you how to do what I'm asking you to do. Those crystals have no place here. But he got all offended, you know, that I said, your crystals don't have any place here. It was like, well, frankly, I don't know how to help you. You know, you're not here to rely on crystals to do this work. You're here to learn to use this protocol. This protocol was developed by the US government. It was tested, it was proven, and it was designed to take anybody from any walk of life and allow them or cause them to produce usable intelligence data about a target distant in space-time. Not somebody who claimed to be natural gifted, not somebody who had been shot in the head, not somebody who had a heart attack, all those different things. You don't have to have any of that stuff in your bag of tricks to be a coordinate remote viewer. You have only but to show up and say, I'm going to learn this protocol. And then again, as I said, at the end of that, you may decide that it's not for you, and it truly isn't for everybody. And I'll be the first guy to tell you that. It requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of, you know, checking yourself, putting your imagination in check and following the protocol. And if this, then do this. If that shows up, then do this. And you have to trust the structure and not just trust whatever happens to be showing up. You're trusting the structure. It will cause you to produce data. That's why it was invented. That's why it was designed. So other modalities, other abilities, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've had people who come to class who put that stuff aside and learn coordinate remote viewing. And some of them say, I'll never do that again. This is what I'm going to do from here on out. Others come and do it, put that aside, do it, come at the end of the class and say, yeah, not for me. You know, I'm going to go back to doing what I did do. And I'm going to pat you on the back and say, well done, you know, that you've come to that conclusion. I'm not going to ever try to force feed anybody that this is the one way, the only way, and the best way. It just may not be for all of you. So you have to look at it from that perspective. And give it a shot. See what you like or don't like about it. it's there. It'll always be there. It's been here for decades now, and with tremendous success. And it's the one tool that the government used as an intelligence collection tool. Nothing else was ever used to any degree of success, to including channeling and other modalities that were allowed to be experimented on, but did not produce usable data that the intel community used, that they considered, usable data that produced usable intelligence, actionable intelligence for them. So, and they used automatic writing and channelers and transmediums, and none of it was ever successful. No, it just wasn't. And I was all for it, because here's where I am with it is, I kind of had to pinch myself every day going to work, because look at this. I'm a former Army Ranger, but now I'm getting paid by the U.S. government to go to work, to go into an altered state of consciousness, to spy on something, distant in space-time, and to come back and write a session summary about it. And at that juncture, who would I be to put down any other modality that would be out there? It's certainly not me. And I was for try it all. If it works, it works. If it didn't work, then I guess it wouldn't survive. So they tried it all, as best they could. At least during the time I was there, they were trying all these other modalities, and they just didn't pan out for them. So I don't know if they're still doing them or not, but I know that they're still doing coordinate remote viewing, and I know they're still doing extended remote viewing. That stuff is still there. They did not shut down that unit and do away with this program simply because a few people wrote books about it. Any of you that have read enough spy novels know that the intelligence community of the United States does not put all of its eggs in one basket like that. Absolutely not. So they may have shut down that particular organization at Fort Meade, Maryland. They may well have done that, but they certainly did not do away with this program that was tested in a bed of science, proven in a bed of science, used in a bed of science, produced actionable, usable intelligence data for decades. They didn't do away with that because some books were written. They would probably like you to believe that, but they didn't do away with it. So that would be my take on that, about psychic ability and whether or not this would work for you.
Okay. That somewhat leads into the next question, which is kind of a loaded question. Do you think that a watered down version of remote viewing was allowed to be released to the general public so as not to allow civilians the real technology?
Well, that would imply that I never knew what the real version was. Mm-hmm. So I knew what the real version was, unless someone thinks that what I and everybody at that unit was doing was fake. So it wasn't. So what we teach, what all of us who have come out of that unit that are teaching was what we learned in the unit. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there was some big conspiracy scheme to take all of the people at the Fort Meade, Maryland unit and spend decades teaching them how to do something that was wrong. And I'll say this too, I also remote viewed with Ingo Swann. So that would also imply that Ingo Swann, who considered himself before he passed the father of coordinate remote viewing, that he too did not know what he was talking about or doing. So interesting question.
We have a number of people asking about plans for more advanced classes, Embracing the Shadow, Explorers courses, and things he did in the past.
Yeah. What was What was the question?
The question is, what are your plans for doing more of the advanced courses beyond ERV in the future?
We're going to do them. We're going to do them all. We're going to have to get them on the schedule and do them. I mean, this next class coming up in December in Toronto, and then there's a class coming up in Vancouver as well. Jay, you have those dates for those?
Yeah, we shared those with the list, and they'll get emailed out as well.
Okay, excellent. Then both of those classes will be coordinate remote viewing, and then as quickly as either Becky in Vancouver or us in Toronto can get them, get the advanced classes on the schedule, we'll be doing them. So, I mean, a lot of this has been relying upon my full recovery from being really a sick guy for the last 2 years. So I think I'm out of the woods, and I'm ready to go now. So as long as I stay healthy, we're going to push forward. We're going to push forward in a big way with the schedule.
Great. Do you want to do a couple more? We've actually pushed through nearly every one of the questions.
Yeah, sure. Got a couple more, yeah.
We have a gentleman who's asking about the use of ARV in predicting the outcome of the market or sporting events.
I don't know what ARV is.
I'm a little bit familiar with it.
This has come up with.
The experiment was that rather than trying to remote view numbers on, say, a blackjack table, they would put a particular flavor in their mouth after the outcome. And so they would try and remote view that flavor that they're experiencing in advance. And there's probably more to it, but that's kind of my basic understanding of how it worked, associating something else to the outcome.
I've never seen it. I mean, that's just what they're dealing with is a different kind of feedback. And then that feedback, I understand what they're trying to do with it. I'm not putting any of this down. I'm just telling you, I've never seen any of it work. I've never seen, they tried to do it in the unit. They were going to guess the lottery. They were going to do all these things. And when I say the unit, I mean the unit back at Fort Meade through the DIA, CIA. And they never won the lottery. I've never seen anybody. And what I have seen is some people who were teaching remote viewing, who claimed that they were authorized to teach remote viewing, who got their ass in a big sling with the SEC because they were telling people that they would teach them how to use remote viewing to guess which stock to buy and other things. And so they made those promises and charged money for those promises and got their butt in a big bad way very fast by the SEC. And they're still watching them. So that happened from 2 people I know. And so steer away from that kind of stuff. I don't know, if you've got a group of people that want to sit around as a hobby and try to do this thing, but it's not what coordinate remote viewing was designed to do. And because at that point it becomes something relegated to like a coin toss, because it's either a yes or a no, or it's this or that. And that's not how remote viewing works. It is gathering elements of data to form a larger picture. So it's putting the pieces of the puzzle together. It's never just trusting an operation, a protocol that is not 100% accurate to be 100% accurate in order for it to be right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Before it can be right, before you can win at the table or guess the proper number, that protocol has to be 100% right. And that is rule number 1. Remote viewing is not 100% right. Never has been, never will be. Rule number 2, never trust single remote viewer operating independently of other remote viewers. Right? So as long as you adhere to those 2 rules, you will never get yourself in a bind. You will never promise something you cannot deliver on. You will never, end up lying to somebody about something. And I'm not saying that whoever's working in ARV is. I'm just telling you that as long as you adhere to the rules, as I have expressed them to you, you will never get yourself in trouble. You will never make a promise you cannot deliver on. I promise you, if you will adhere to those rules. Violate those rules, those principles, and you'll probably get in trouble.
Great.
So I don't know of the other groups. I can tell you that there are hundreds of people who have claimed to have been part of remote viewing programs, and I don't know if they were or they weren't. I can tell you they weren't at Fort Meade. That's all I can tell you. So that doesn't mean that, you know, I know of all the remote viewing units. Ingo Swan and I both talked at length about this when I lived in Manhattan, and he lived in the Bowery in Manhattan. We talked about, you know, what other remote viewing programs there were, and he said that he had been tasked with teaching other people in other remote viewing programs. So, okay, then there had to be other programs. But I don't know if the people that are doing some of these other trainings, if that's in fact where they learned what they learned or what they're doing. I have no idea. I really don't. So I can't speak badly of them or positively of them. I just guess that you have to let the buyer beware.
Okay.
What you're going to do with it.
Can you talk about the dimensions involved in remote viewing beyond the dimensions that we experience as everyday reality?
Well, I can say this to you, that we know that in modern cosmology, that we know that our universe has a finite edge to it. And so if we accept that in cosmology, that the universe has a finite edge to it, and they're able to determine that based on their ability to measure that, you know, galaxies that are separating. And so basically they're reverse engineering everything with mathematics to say that if these galaxies are accelerating apart, then there was a time, if we reverse engineer that back, when did it all get to this place where the Big Bang, which was not a Big Bang, it was not an explosion, it was an introduction of, an entrance, if you will, of one dimension into this dimension. But what you say from that, what you ask yourself from that is, then what if our universe now entered into this dimension, then what else is in this dimension with us? What other universes are in this dimension? How many other dimensions are there? And what are those dimensions in? And what are those dimensions in? You see, it's just never ending. It's like, those of you that take the class, you will see I lecture to this, and there's a slide I put up that's like bubbles that have these interchangeable wormholes, you know, where these wormholes are connected, universe to universe. I mean, you know, dimension to dimension, universe to universe. And every time another universe pushes through, then you end up within another dimension forms. And it just keeps happening like that. Boonk, 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 you know, they keep popping out there. Now, does any of that, do you have any limits as a remote viewer in looking at those? None. Why? Because you're detecting and decoding, you're viewing a waveform. You're seeing the waveform expression, everything. That's how you are omnipresent, omnipotent. You're in a holographic matrix field, right? Holographic matrix field means that you break off one piece of this dimension. All of the waveform expression of everything in the dimension is in that piece. That's what a hologram is. So by just looking at that piece, you're seeing or have access to the waveform expression of everything in that universe, everything in that dimension. And so you are in every dimension. Even as we sit here now talking, we're separated by space and time, but we are all linked on an energetic level, in a waveform level. The waveform of me is it commingling with the waveform of each of you, and each of you commingling with me. I mean, it is, look, this is what Deepak Chopra has built an entire living talking about. You know, we taught with Deepak, taught a class called Awakening the Divine Potential Within. It was coordinate remote viewing, Deepak Chopra style. And it was, I thought it was great. But a lot of the folks that follow Deepak Chopra didn't, because it was like their questions were well founded. It was like, look, you know, we meditate. we just want to meditate. Don't we ever get a chance to just meditate? It's like, no, you're doing coordinate remote viewing. You're detecting and decoding, You're objectifying on the page. You're working here. This is work. You're following a protocol. No, you don't get to just meditate. So I think we did several classes with him, but I think it went over like a lead balloon in certain ways, because they just wanted time to be with themselves, you know, to just meditate. And that's good. That's what they're there to do. That's what he teaches. That. So the two protocols, the two techniques that we taught, even though Deepak and I thought it was fantastic and that it would be a really good thing to do, the people that follow him did not. So at least a percentage of them did not, enough that we continued. We didn't continue it. Do we have other questions?
I think you made it to the end. We could wrap it up on that high note.
Well, look, I really enjoy doing this with all of you. I love you, and I mean that. I love you for being there, for asking these questions. I love and appreciate your curiosity, just the genuineness with which you are here. I mean, look at this. Look at what we've had from just, I mean, I'm just always amazed that people want to learn, you know, that people want to know, that people want to discover what's on the other side, you know, what's under the tent flap. Everybody wants to keep moving forward and going and exploring and doing. And all of you are just amazing. I mean, those of you that have been with me for years and those of you that are just showing up now. I mean, it's amazing to see it all unfolding. And I hope I see you in a class in Vancouver or in Toronto. I hope I see you and see you soon, and we'll go continue this journey together. Okay.